especially how aggressive some of these goals are. If you don't have that trust in your team and they don't have that trust in you, you're already spelling a bit of disaster. My philosophy on sales, it's funny. It's funny that you asked that because it's actually a bit of an interview question that I use. So a question I like to ask people is, what is their definition of sales? Because I mean, for all of us that are in sales, we know that, this isn't a bachelor sales. You don't get bachelor degrees or master's degrees or PhDs. It's really fundamentally like kind of premised on like your career. And in many cases, like here in the United States, people will say what's on your W-2. So how much money you're making, because obviously you're in sales, right? So high risk, high reward. But if I was to ask myself the question of how I would define sales, I like to define it as this transfer of energy, passion, if you will. So, when I was actively selling as a sales individual, I wanted to represent and be a part of not just a company that, was aligned to my thoughts. It's that transfer of energy and passion. So it's really important, or it has always been important to me in my career, to be a part of companies whose culture is, similar to the things that I hold dear, but then also selling a product that is something that I can really back and want to be a part of. And selling to a buyer that I'm actually really, really care about, because in the end of the day, right, another big aspect of sales is problem solving. And to really do that, you got to, have the solution for them. So you got to make sure that you represent and be a part of a product that does that. So I love asking that question, and it's been very interesting for me over the years to get all the different kinds of answers, where you get some answers that are kind of similar to mine, others that are almost an answer taken from a dictionary. And it's other cases where maybe an individual hasn't ever thought about that, which, for me is always a bit of a negative, because if you're making your career in sales, you should, have your own definition of it and embrace that, because this is your career.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to see we're aligned on our questions. Cool. So sales is a transfer of energy. This makes a lot of sense, and I love that. How does this now reflect as you as a leader and the energy you transfer to your team? How has that changed, and what kind of energy are we talking about here?
That's another great question, and I think it falls well into the overall concept of leadership then, right? So, the energy that I put in my team is, so really for me, right, that energy, right, is driving how I want to manage my team. And I want that team to be successful, but I don't want them just to be successful in hitting and achieving their goals. I want them to be successful as people, because they have, and especially I'm looking at this in the mindset of an early stage startup, right? They've taken a gamble and taken a risk to start this journey on with me, and the goals and the directives that I've put on the table to achieve that. And it's even more so now in the world of the pandemic and remote work, where you can't just be engaging with people face to face, right? You have to make them feel empowered, but then also know that I trust them, but in return, they should be trusting me, because that is the kind of core dynamic that we need for all of us to be really successful here. So I need to trust that they can get their job done, but they need to trust that I have their back. Which, I think at times, especially with the way that work is and how fast we have to move, and especially how aggressive some of these goals are, if you don't have that trust in your team and they don't have that trust in you, you're already spelling a bit of disaster. So the energy that I'm pouring into them is, again, excitement and passion for the deals that they're looking to close, but also the objectives that they're trying to accomplish over this year, or maybe over the next 18 months with their own professional development. So I put a lot of effort in that too, because, growing the business is also about growing yourself.
I love that. I love that last part there. I'm glad you bring up trust in the context of high growth early stage. As we know, this is genuinely challenging. Um, and it seems to me there's almost like a tension between there being high revenue growth targets, a pressure because of runway and what we need to achieve to keep on going and to grow. And you're right, a necessity to have people we trust and who can act with initiative.
Yes.
But as a leader, for me, it seems like if I was a leader, that would be really nerve-wracking, because I'd want to trust these people to do a good job, but I'd also be aware of this overbearing thing above us. So how do you actually personally get to a position where that's possible and you can close the laptop down and you feel comfortable?
Communication flow. Communication flow is the next secret ingredient in all of that. And that's done in a variety of ways, right? It's in the, in the coordinated, structured way. But then there's also the unstructured on the fly way. And you have to manage those two appropriately. The structured approach, like what I mean by that is like a formal one-to-one, go through their pipeline. Then maybe you have the team meeting, and then maybe you even have this forecast meeting, however, which way people structure it. I have all of those meetings myself, right? And those are very important to kind of keep people accountable to the greater community that you have built or have around you, that everyone knows that they're doing their fair share to achieve, again, that goal. But then that kind of off the cuff kind of side thing. So I spend a lot of time, odd slacks, for instance, if I knew that if somebody on my team is also into, Premier League football, and I know that they're supporting, let's say, Tottenham, then, and I saw the goal, or I saw the results from last night, those kind of things. So it's having this communication flow and having a reason to talk to people, but then also just letting them know that you're approachable on not just the things that are happening in the team, but then also things that are happening around them, both in the team or in their deal, but also in their greater community. Because a lot of times too, that I've noticed, and especially now in the pandemic, there's a lot of noise out there. And it's good. It's important to be in tune with your team, especially for trust reasons. So if you knew that somebody on your team member or one of your team members has kids, right, and a kid is sick, and it's the end of the quarter, how do you manage and deal with that? So again, you have the trust that that they've set up everything correctly, but then you also want to give them, and they have the trust in you, that I'm going to give them the ability to help their child. So there's a lot of different dynamics in that way, but it all really boils down to good communication, both the structured and the unstructured. And I'm always available to them, and then they know that.
Glad you bring up the unstructured part of communication. It's not something that gets mentioned so often.
Yeah.
So it's a good point to raise, Anton. I wanted to move on to what we discussed offline, which is the environment we're in terms of the market and our personas that we sell to, and also where we are in our growth, has a massive impact on the values we set in the team. And we spoke about some interesting examples of that. And I wanted to give you the floor really to speak through your workflow and ideas there, how these things intermingle and change the values we want team members to have and hopefully aspire to.
Yeah. No, no, thanks for bringing that up. So from the teams that I've managed, both here in the United States and also in Europe, you obviously have the company values, company culture, if you will. But I also find it very important is that the sales team has, maybe subculture is not the right word, but it's within inside of that context, is that we have our own values that we're bringing to the table, right? So we have the values of the company, but then we also have the values that we want to share or bring to the clients. And since in the sales side, the client interaction is so much more high and robust than, let's say, the overall collective company, especially they're trying to build values that, engineering and operations and other departments are a part of. And so what we've done in the past is really literally build kind of operational principles. And these principles are things that we strive for. When putting together these operational principles, and I've changed and tailored it per company. So you kind of look where the company is, the team that you have, or the team you want to build, look at the values of that company, and then also look at what stage the company's growth is, could also say quite a bit. But a lot of that is then really putting an emphasis on, just the client first. Obviously, we're in sales. Yes, we want to close a lot of business, but it's ultimately about the client, but also about the dynamics inside of the team. Because again, the team itself has its own community, and it's important to really build that community inside of that team, so everyone is marching it in the same direction, but then also focused on the same goals, and has and embraced the same values between each other. And a lot of that dealing around, I worked with a company a long time ago that put a lot of value on respect, but that concept of respect is a bit vague, where in the context of what they had it, and it's something I still hold very true today. It holds very dear to me today, is this, the respect for not just the client, but the respect for the company, respect for the product, respect for the price, and so forth, and respect for each other, right? You don't want a community that you've built on a sales team of like having sharp elbows. I mean, maybe for some, in those situations, they want a highly competitive, no holds bar type of environment. I've worked in a sales org like that myself, but it's not really conducive to how we do business today. And especially if you're trying to sell SaaS and you're selling a SaaS product that is new or is building a new category in itself, right? You have to build a lot of education around that, both internally and externally. So and I have my document here. I'm just going to actually pull up a few other points in it if you wanted me to speak of it. But
yeah, if you felt comfortable, please do. I really enjoyed looking at it, actually.
Yeah. So, the high level principles, or the team cult mentality and culture, obviously the customer first, as I was mentioning, the respect, stamina is a very big thing in this process, but then also is having fun. In this remote environment that we're in now, having fun, you got to enjoy what you're doing, because if you're not enjoying what you're doing, and especially that energy transfer, that passion transfer, it comes off on a call. If you're, on your way out, or you just don't care about what you do, the client is going to pick up on that. And they're even going to pick up on it more so over a call, because in a call, the certain tones and the way that you're speaking are highlighted, because that's really what they're picking up out of. You might have a presentation in front of you, or, the actual product itself, depending on, how you want to structure those demos. But, the tone and the energy that's coming across that phone is a really important piece in this. And if you're not having fun, that's not going to resonate, and that's not going to come across, and it's not going to get someone else excited about what you have and the problems that you're trying to solve for them. The next bit of that, though, too, is really, the guiding principles to our customers. And I think this is really, really important. And this is something that you have to really share across the team, because it also sets the stage and sets that expectation, right? Expectations are very, very important, and always making sure that everyone's aligned on those expectations are very, very important. But there should be an expectation of what you want them to provide that client. And that's things of, obviously being quick and giving them the information they need, becoming that trusted advisor, being professional, but being professionally persistent. So a lot of time people disappear on you, and there is a pretty fine line at times of being extremely annoying or being professionally persistent. And a lot of that's due to probably the timing that you reach out, or some of the words that you say, or the sentence and how you structure it. Those kind of things come into play. And again, being positive and smiling. Smiling is, on these Zoom calls, the last thing you want to do is deal with someone who's looking down at their phone or looking like they're really depressed, right? A smile also resonates like positivity and energy that that buyer will pick up on. And then finally from there is really, building that lasting relationship. My grandfather was in sales, and he always said that, it takes a year to build relationships with clients. So your first year in sales is always the most difficult. It's when you get in the second or third year that things become easier, because then you build a reputation. People speak, they know you, they've seen you in action at talking about the clients, and then those clients will speak to other people who will buy from you. So in fact, like when I was actually selling, I was at this company in Redwood City, and literally after my first year, I would say that probably 50% of the sales that I was doing in that then year two were coming off of recommendations. So clients going to conferences and meetings talking about our product, but then saying, hey, I have someone that you need to talk to, or I think this, that problem, yeah, this software is going to serve that problem, and I have a really great person you need to speak to about that. That's huge. That word of mouth sale is what, you always want to be striving for. And that's what we're really trying to do with these goals, is that we're really trying to set ourselves different than our competition, but then also leaving a lasting impression with the people that we're selling to.
Yeah.
And then
Anton, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say the next component of that is like our goals to ourselves, which again, we're a community here, right? And we have to hold each other accountable to the things that we want to do. And so it's very important then for everyone to know that obviously, our goals to ourselves are obviously hitting our goals, but then learning and improving the environment that we're in, respecting each other, and then always just trying to give it your best, which can be hard at times, especially with the way that things have been through the pandemic. But, striving to always to provide and give everyone the best that you can, both internally, externally, has huge dividends later.
Fantastic. Genuinely, some of the points you mentioned there, I think can be lost in the world of online or remote selling. And that's fantastic, honestly. I have a final question for you then, since you had so much great knowledge to share there. If you could ask a room of the top sellers or sales leaders to ever do it, what would you ask them?
If I could ask them any question?
Yes.
That is a great question, Tom. And I've never been asked that question before. It's actually a very exciting one. So it's just like, there's like 10 questions that come to mind, but what is probably the most appropriate? And I would say of the top sellers, if I had a room full of the top individual contributing like sellers in the world, I would ask them what actually motivates them, especially now. I mean, obviously money is an aspect. That's why people get into sales, but then there's also so much more to that. And at times I think people would be really surprised that the top sellers in most orgs, money is just an output of a true motivation. And again, if it's that love and desire of helping people, or it is that, they appreciate the challenge of, starting from nothing to something, that is the true real motivator. The money is just the convenient response, but those aspects of it, those are the things I would want to know. And then those are the things that I would like to then almost reinforce and then educate my own people on, because I mean, I have a sense of it myself, but if I had a room full of people and I was taking a survey, those would be the things that I really want to know, because that's what I would want to build on in my future teams.